I tried a mixing trick I saw on YouTube and it made things worse for me, but I've seen it in so many videos. What are other common mixing tricks that I might just want to avoid? After teaching well over 1,000 producers at this point, I've noticed that most bad mixes aren't necessarily caused by the lack of knowledge. Oh, trust me, there's plenty of that out there right now. It's actually the opposite. They're caused by following horrible advice or good advice without understanding the proper context. It's like taking medicine for the wrong illness. Sometimes the fix becomes the problem. Let me show you some very specific things that I see on YouTube that I get taught all the time, and I just think it's horrible advice. I really do. I really do. This is my hot take video, and I will die on this hill. The first has got to be the Haas effect. If you don't know what the Haas effect is, the Haas effect, it basically means taking a mono signal, like this guitar, for example. This guitar is a mono signal, and I think it sounds great. Let's take a listen to what this guitar sounds like in the context first. Sounds great. We have two guitars, so one in the left and one in the right. We actually re-recorded those. I did not just copy and paste these down. You cannot do that. It doesn't work. And so some people will try to use the Haas effect to make a mono signal stereo. and I'm telling you right now, it just doesn't work. This is what the guitar sounds like in mono. And some people think, wow, okay, so if I want to make it stereo, what I could do is I could just duplicate this and I could delay the audio a little bit. Slide it forward or backward compared to the other one. And there's even plugins that do this for you, like Kilohertz Haas. And what it does is it delays either left channel or the right channel, and it creates this stereo width. Off, and then on. Now, if you're listening on studio monitors or headphones, and or maybe your phone is sideways, you can actually hear the stereo width that's happening when I turn this plugin on, and you may think it sounds great. With it off, with it on. And you're like, wow, look at this. This is incredible. This is like I don't even need to retract my guitars. They already sound great. In fact, there's even doublers inside of a lot of amp sims, like in a lot of neural DSPs. Anything neural DSP, I think accent and above, you can turn on the doubler here, and it can create like a 6 millisecond double between the left and the right. So it takes the mono signal and makes it a double. And a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, I can turn this on and I can just let it go. No, no, you cannot. It does not sound the same. And let me show you exactly why that is. So let's take this mono signal again. And then I will turn on and off this plugin. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to render everything to mono. So yes, I'm adding the Haas effect to try to make it stereo, but I am summing the whole mix down to mono. And I'm going to show you that is not mono compatible. And before I get any comments about people saying, well, people don't listen to stuff in mono anymore. Everything's in stereo. Even your phone's in stereo. No, people listen to stuff in mono more now than they ever have. If you have a pair of AirPods or any of these wireless earbuds and you take one out, just one, it takes both the left and the right channel and sums it to one. So you can hear both the left and the right, and it sums it to a single mono channel. People are listening to music, your music, in mono more than they ever have before. Yikes! So we need to make sure that they are mono compatible. Yes, in the car, it may be stereo, but people will listen to it in the car, but they're most likely going to be listening to your music on AirPods or earbuds or something like that. And a lot of times, they're going to be listening it with one. I'm a dad. If I ever listen to anything, I have to have one out, because if I don't have one out, I have no idea. I could be washing dishes and my child could be throwing glass on the floor or something. It's insane. And so, yes, I listen to stuff in mono as well, not because I want to, but because that's the way the technology is right now. So let's take a look at what happens when I actually force my entire mix down to mono, and then I turn on the Haas effect. Listen to this. Whoa. It like lost all of the low end, and it sounds really weird, right? So let's adjust the delay time. Maybe we need to adjust the delay time up or down to eliminate some of these phasing issues. It's almost like there's no setting at all that can eliminate those phasing issues. And that's because there is not. There is no way to completely eliminate the phasing issue because you're taking the exact same signal here and you're duplicating it down. You cannot do that. What you have to do is you have to re-record the guitar separately. You need to have a left channel and a right channel and record the guitar separately and play them that way. And listen to how much better it sounds. It's so much more mono compatible. The low end doesn't disappear. It doesn't sound weird and phasey. It does a really good job holding up. And that's because I recorded the same guitar twice. So don't use the Haas effect. That's one of the ones that I just think is horrible advice. Don't use it. Just re-record whatever you're doing. If you need a mono signal and you need to make it stereo, just double it. Actually physically record it again, or play the part again, or bring in another instance of MIDI notes, but change the velocity and see if you can actually make it actually different. Make the parts different and put one in the left and one in the right. Don't be using these Haas effect plugins or these other doubler tools that are built inside of your amp sims and stuff. They're nice in a pinch and handy if you're jamming out, but they are not helpful for getting a professional, polished, professional sounding mix. They just don't work that well and they create phasing issues and there's just a lot of problems with them. That's just the first one. Oh boy, I'm getting fired up. The next mistake that I see all the time, I'll be opening up my sessions with producers and I'll start to notice a bunch of problems with their sessions. They have way too much stuff going on. They have 17 different layers on snares and 14 different layers on kicks, and it's an absolute disaster. It's really annoying. I mean, like, it's the overall sound is annoying, not the fact that like what they did was annoying. It's just the overall sound is, and that's why they're there. They've opened up sessions with me to fix that. And one of the most common things that I see is way too many samples, layering tons of samples, like 17 different kick drums and 13 different snare layers. And if you take a look at my drums here, and once again, we'll listen to it in the context of the mix here. You may think that I'm layering lots of different snares to get that really big, punchy, and polished sounding snare, but I'm not. I have two. I have my main snare, and then I have my one singular snare sample. That's it. That one snare sample, and then my main snare, and that's it. Same thing with the kick. I have my main kick, and then my main kick sample, and that's it. I don't have anything else besides those. And when I added those samples originally, it was for a purpose. I added that kick sample because I wanted a little bit more sub lows and a clicky top. A little bit more of a modern style kick. And I also wanted the same for the snare. I wanted some width is what I was really looking for. That wide reverb kind of sound with some snappy kind of transients. That's what I was looking for. I added those in and that was all I needed. What happens is a lot of producers will start to add 13 different snares. This one snare will add in some low end, and then this other snare sounds really good, so let's blend that in. And then this fourth snare and fifth snare sounds good, and so let's blend all these in. And just like the Haas effect, when we have issues with blending all of this stuff in and blending more things in, you start to create phase issues. And if you don't know what phasing is, basically imagine it like this. Audio moves in waves like this. So we have positive energy that's here, and then we have negative energy that's here. So imagine that this is positive 4 dB, right? And this is like, we'll say, negative 4 dB here, right? So the speaker is coming back in, and then the speaker is being pushed out to you. If this cycle happens 440 times, that is an A note. When you blend in other samples, you are blending in more waves. And imagine a wave that is actually doing the opposite of what the one is on the top. So this one is being boosted by 4 dB, and this one may be cut by 4 dB. Well, they're going to cancel themselves out. The speaker cannot go in and out at the same time. It's completely impossible. And so if one speaker is playing it, and then you have a separate speaker playing it, it can work, but then you sum it down to mono, that's where the Haas effect was coming in. This is where that was completely falling apart. It's the same thing when you add more drum samples. And the more samples you add, the more risk of phase you have, because each drum sample is slightly different, and you start to cancel things out. Less really is more in this case, specifically when you're adding in drum samples. And I've seen a lot of producers do this, a lot of really popular Grammy-winning producers, they do have a lot of samples sometimes on their mixes, but what they're doing is they're extremely intentional with it. The one kick sample is a real sub-low kick that they're just bringing in, and the next one has that clickiness that they're looking for. Maybe they had a specific mallet they were using on the kick drum that was plastic instead of the typical felt, and they really liked the way that sounded. They want to blend that in with it. Each sample has a specific purpose. So if you don't have a specific purpose for your samples and you can't actually say it out loud and articulate it, then why is it there? You need to cut it out. It doesn't need to be there. And it's actually more of a problem because it's there than it would be if it was just gone entirely. And then the more samples you add, the more things just start to fall apart. It becomes a problem. I'm going to turn on and off the snare and kick sample for this, and it's just a single sample, but listen to the difference overall. It just gets it to cut through the mix a little bit more. And it was a very specific thing. I wanted some width out of that snare, and a little bit of snap. I wanted some sub-lows with a bit of clickiness out of that kick, and that's where those specific snare samples and kick samples came into play. And it was just one each. That was more than enough. If you want to know exactly what a good session looks like, if you go down in the description below, I have a free session breakdown and the stems from one of my songs. You can download it, copy my settings, and bring the stems into your session and actually take a look at what it takes to make something like this. If you are interested, that's completely free. I'll leave a link to that down in the description below, and you can steal my stuff. Go ahead, just take it. I want you to learn, and I want you to have great sounding stuff. That's down there in the description below. It's completely free. Another mistake that I see quite often is over-EQing everything or adding an EQ to everything just for the sake of doing so. One of the most common examples of this, and luckily I am seeing a lot more videos on YouTube and a lot more common advice pushing against this, which is awesome. But there was a lot of common advice for a while, and maybe you still believe this, which is cut everything in the low end below 30 hertz or below 50 hertz or below 60 hertz, because there's a lot of stuff down there that just doesn't need to be there. Everything gets cut below 100 hertz except for your drums and your bass. And there's this common consensus for the longest time that if it doesn't need to be down there, get rid of it. And I kind of subscribed to that for the longest time, and my mixes started to get a lot better when I started to ignore that advice. And the reason is there's a lot of stuff in the low end that actually does need to be there. In your guitars, for example, you can see that these guitars, there is some stuff going on in the low end. I don't even have any EQ, any compression, or anything going on these guitars outside of what's going on inside of the amp itself. But look at how much low end there is on these guitars. I mean, there is so much like low and even sub low content on those guitars, and that is something that I would have looked at 10, 15 years ago and thought I needed to cut out entirely, but then my guitars would have sounded thin. It's because we're trusting our eyes more than we're trusting our ears. I like to think of these tools that use our eyes. I love having EQs that show us an analyzer of what is actually going on in the frequency spectrums. But I like to think of these tools more like driving a car. When you're driving a car and you hear police sirens, you immediately start looking around, looking for the lights. Are they pulling me over? Are they pulling somebody else over? What's going on? And then if you see lights, but don't hear a siren, you look up in your rearview mirror and you see it, you're pulling over. You're like, they're probably after me, so I probably had to pull over. What did I do? Did I go too fast? What's going on? And it's the same, but flipped in the studio. If you are looking at an EQ and you see this random spike at 1K, that doesn't mean you immediately pull it down. What it means is it allows you to pay attention and listen. Just like when you're in the car and you hear the sirens, you start looking around like, are they going this direction? Are they going the other direction? It is a great tool, but it is more like a backseat driver. And that's the same thing here. Your eyes, you can absolutely trust your eyes, just like you trust your ears when you're driving, but they should be a backseat driver to the overall mix. And so just because you see this sub-low content going on in the low end does not mean that it has to leave. It sounds great the way that it is. So why don't I leave it? Why would I cut that out of there? And some of that low-end energy and some of that buildup, there's a lot of exciting things that can happen down there. And unless it's a problem, unless you listen to it or you see it and you're like, I wonder if it's a problem, and you start listening and you go, oh yeah, actually it is fighting with my bass. My kick drum isn't cutting through the mix like I would like. Then you can start using these tools to clean things up. And so don't over EQ. I see this like cutting the low end out of everything is just such another common piece of advice that I actually think is really bad and actually kind of harmful to a lot of producers, especially beginning mixing and mastering engineers, where they're looking for a formula, this one specific thing that's always going to work for me. And when I see stuff like that, it does break my heart just a little bit because I fell for it. I did. I fell for it for a long time. And I don't want you to fall for the same things. The next thing is compressing out of habit, or even just throwing a plugin on out of habit. There was this common trend that was going around for a while. Again, well, look at me. I used to follow all the trends because I thought that was the secret sauce. And I would throw a plugin on everything because I thought that was where the magic sauce was. In fact, I actually had one guy who did have some pretty good mixes, but he told me to throw on a saturation plugin or some type of tube saturation or tube emulation plugin on every single channel. A great example of this would be Slate Digital Virtual Channel Strip. And he's like, just put a channel strip plugin on every single channel. And what that will do is it will then sound like you're recording it through a console. And I used to do this all the time because I thought I had to. But then the habit got worse. Like, that's not such a bad habit. That is kind of cool, and it can add some slight vibes overall, but not a whole lot. But then things started to get worse. I saw another video and I read another post on Reddit or some of these other forums that used to exist back in the day where people were saying sometimes they'll just add a compressor and it won't be compressing anything at all, but they'll just add it because it adds that analog sounding vibe to it. And then I started doing that. And then I heard this thing about the Neve and how the Neve EQs have that same kind of saturation and add some other stuff. And so then I started adding all of these plugins to every single track because I thought I needed it, when in all reality, I didn't. It was getting in the way of my processing power, is getting in the way of my workflow, and it was getting in the way of me actually just finishing some good old darn music. And I started eliminating a lot of the stuff out of my workflow entirely, and my mixes got a lot better. You can see that I don't have anything on my guitars at all. I'm using Misha Mansour archetype from Neural DSP, and most of the processing that's going on is going on inside of this plugin itself. Not a whole lot. I just get a great tone at the source, and then I route them all to a bus, and I don't even have any EQ on here at all. I've just pulled up this EQ to show you that example earlier. That's it. It just sounds good. And so a lot of times you're like, well, should I have something here? I feel like I need to. Well, if you feel like you need to, but it still sounds good, then you just need to ignore that. That is an instinct that is honestly just wrong. If it doesn't need it, if it sounds good, it is good, and that is the rule. Just because there's this blank open section here, there's no plugins here or here or here or here, and oh my gosh, I feel like I should have plugins on absolutely everything. Look at all of this with no plugins on it at all. Well, if it sounds good, it is good. We don't have to add plugins. We don't have to add compression or EQ or anything out of habit. Some things just don't need it. We don't want to add things because we feel like they're going to enhance something, and I totally get that. Some mixing things are enhancing. That's for sure. I will say that. But a lot of times it's really just about shaping. It's about volume shaping, getting things to set in the mix well, and we don't have to add things because we feel like we need to. The last horrible piece of advice that I see all the time on the internet and just being pushed around the forums is when somebody asks a question. This is specifically like if you've ever gone to a YouTube comment and asked a question, or maybe you're in a forum and asked a question, or maybe you're in a couple groups and you've asked some questions. People will then try to immediately prescribe something to you without actually understanding what the root cause is. And so you end up fixing symptoms instead of the actual causes. For example, layering the 7 different snares together to make the drum sound fatter when the original snare was the problem. You didn't have a good snare sound at the source. You didn't hit it hard enough. You didn't record it well enough, or you didn't grab a good snare library, the good drum library with a great snare in it that you were looking for. So context always matters. Just like medicine isn't bad, it's just some medicine is not for you, and some mixing tricks are not for you. So a lot of the stuff that I see is people will try to prescribe something to somebody with, first of all, never hearing their music, which is a bummer. If you ever get feedback on your mixes and someone has not listened to that music at all, it is the blind leading the blind there. That is awful. That is not helpful to anyone at all. And you want to make sure that they are fixing the cause, not the symptom. A great example of this is the low end in my mixes sound awful. If somebody listens to it and they say, well, I actually think the bass guitar is the problem, let's go into it. They take a listen and they go, oh yeah, your playing is not as tight as everything else is, so let's tighten up the playing. That's fixing the cause. The cause was the bass wasn't as tight. Maybe the notes were wrong, or the actual execution of it was inconsistent, right? If somebody immediately goes and grabs an EQ and says, well, you need to fix something going on in your low end, that's just the symptom of the problem. The cause was the poorly played bass guitar, and the fix was fixing the symptom. And you're still not going to get a good result out of it. It may be better, but you're still in fixing mode and not in actual problem solving mode, not in curing mode. I will say that is the last piece of horrible advice that I see on the internet, which is everybody's trying to prescribe you something. Copy this specific EQ move. It works every time. Copy this SSL EQ curve and it's always going to work for you. It's almost never like that. If it was like that, a company would come out with one plugin with that specific setting and they would make millions of dollars. But that is just not the case because that doesn't exist. The perfect settings don't exist, which is why there isn't a perfect setting preset in every single one of your plugins. You have to know how to use them. That's what I'm here for. If you want to dive into some of my sessions as well, like I said, links to that are down in the description below. You get a complete session breakdown of one of my songs, and you even get the stems for free. You can go ahead, take a look at what I'm actually doing on my music. Go ahead, copy it, copy paste, whatever you need to do to learn as much as you can from it. Those are all there for your enjoyment and for your learning purposes.